Are you interested in angels, demons, ghosts, spirits, and monsters? Are you curious about their origins, influence, and how to protect against the unknown? If so, then welcome to Southern Demonology, the podcast that explores all of this and more. Welcome back to Southern Demonology, where we explore the infernal, the theological, and the deeply inconvenient corners of spiritual reality. I'm JJ, your friendly neighborhood ancient demonologist, broadcasting from somewhere between a cold southern night and a dusty monastic library. And today, oh today, we're going to Addis. We're diving into one of the most fascinating, misunderstood, and occasionally feared figures in the Ethiopian Orthodox world, the Debtera. They go by many monikers: priest, non-priest, healer, exorcist, musician, magician, demonologist, and sometimes charlatan. If you sense a story there, then buckle up, for it's a doozy. To understand the Debtera, you first have to understand the world from which they emerge. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is one of the oldest surviving Christian traditions that has ancient liturgy, the Meyaz language, and belief not only in angels and saints, but also in demons, czar spirits, the evil eye, and a cosmology that makes the Book of Enoch feel like a field manual. Much like the Coptic Orthodoxy, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church firmly believes in magic and the spiritual. In fact, in many works such as the Kebra Nagast, the glory of the kings, Christ is depicted as both Messiah and magician. Unlike Western Christianity, where demons are subcontracted out to stories to frighten children and to horror movies, in Ethiopia, the demonic is lived, addressed, and actively contested. A 2015 study of possession at the Entoto Kidane-Mihret Monastery documented multi-week exorcisms, named spirits, and internal dialogues with demons. And no, this isn't metaphor. Spirit possession is understood as real, diagnosable, and treatable. That is the world the Debtera inhabits. So what is a Debtera? Depending on who you ask: an educated church musician, a scribe trained in Meyaz, a folk healer, an exorcist, a maker of talismans, a magician flirting with the edge of heresy, and the correct answer is yes. Debteras are trained in church education, but are not usually ordained priests. They sing, they chant, they dance the liturgy, but they may also prepare amulets, diagnose the evil eye, invoke angels against demons, and craft protective scrolls full of cosmological diagrams and incantations. One scholar described them as, inside the church, they perform music and ritual. Outside the church, they are known as producers of talismanic knowledge. That phrase, inside and outside, is key. They occupy a liminal identity, a threshold. And you know what lives at thresholds? That's right, monsters, and people who fight them. Imagine you're a child handed over to the church to study. You memorize psalms and Meyaz. You study numerology, hymns, prayers, liturgical cycles, and demon names. You master sistrum rhythms. You sleep on dirt floors. You absorb both holy tradition and other traditions. Some boys become deacons or priests. Others, especially those not ordained, become debteras. This creates a social paradox. The debtera is educated, but unofficial. Holy, but suspect. A man of prayers and maybe spells. One debtera interviewed in Sympathy for the Devil, Secrecy, Magic, and Transgression Among Ethiopian Orthodox, debtera described it bluntly. A priest uses the cross. A debtera uses the cross, the stroll, and the secret. That word, secret, is everything. There's even a phrase for it, sim in a work, or wax in gold. Words and their overt meaning are like the wax mold in which golden ornaments are cast. Gold, the inner meaning, lies disguised between words, accessible only to those with the ability to infer it. Liturgical role. Debteras lead chants, dance, control rhythm with prayer sticks and sistra, a percussion instrument like a rattle. Without them, the liturgy collapses. They are the sonic backbone of worship. Healer/exorcist. Debteras diagnose Buddha, evil eye, Zara spirits, Ainatila, shadow of the eye, and other entities not seen, but very much felt. They conduct exorcisms, supply holy water, create ritual inscriptions, and cast various spells. In fact, debtera often travel mountain to mountain, monastery to homely abode, seeking others known in the craft in order to either study with them or even purchase their spells or the sacred names of both holy and evil spirits. Before we move on, I do want to elaborate on the structure that exorcisms usually take in Ethiopia. While there are some similarities with the Western world, there are also some dramatic deviations. Largely speaking, there are three primary components. The first stage, Meyaz, to capture. This is when the presence of the spirit first reveals itself. The person may scream, yawn uncontrollably, shake, stretch, cry, groan, or collapse. It looks chaotic, but from the exorcist's perspective, this is the first sign of the spirit being caught. And the trigger can be anything sacred: a prayer, a reading from the miracles of the Virgin Mary, a touch of the cross, a sermon from the exorcist, even just a sprinkle of holy water, or, for some, simply standing in a church building is enough. And yet, here's the fascinating part. Possessed individuals avoid churches with everything they have. Family members often have to drag them there, because if the demon stays out of the sacred space, it stays hidden. But sometimes, paradoxically, people will seek church healing voluntarily, after having a vision of a saint or Christ in a dream, or after every other option fails. Even so, there is no guarantee that the spirit will manifest right away. One healer interviewed in the study, Abba Yared, said, "Going to church is not a guarantee that the evil spirit will appear. God has his own time to heal." Another exorcist, Abba Tesfa, went deeper. He says people come seeking relief from physical problems, but God refuses to heal the body until the soul is healed first. God delays the cure because he wants repentance before relief. That is demonology and theology intertwined, not as theory, but as practice. The second stage, Masleflef. Questioning. Now things get intense, because here the healer talks to the demon. Yes, the person speaks, but not as themselves. They speak in a different voice, sometimes switching back and forth between themselves and the possessing entity. Sometimes they are conscious, sometimes half-conscious, sometimes completely unaware later of what was said. The goal of this stage is interrogation. What is your name? Why are you here? How long have you been in this person? Who sent you? What do you fear? This is every medieval exorcism manual ever written, except still alive. The voice that answers is not considered metaphorical. It is the demon itself speaking, using the body like a microphone. The third stage, Maswotat, driving out. This is the final push, the expulsion. The exorcist asks the spirit directly, "Are you ready to leave?" And here's the fascinating twist. Sometimes the spirit says, "I need a week, maybe 2. According to the exorcists, this delay isn't deception, it's obedience. They believe the spirit is waiting because God or an angel told it to. While it waits, the exorcist orders it, not to harm the host, not to speak through them, not to cause further damage. And then, when the time comes, the spirit is forced to swear in the name of Jesus, Mary, Saint Michael, the Holy Trinity. Some exorcists shout the command 7 times. Some shout it 3 times. Some force the demon to taste the cross. And in most cases, as Abba Yared described, we order the spirits to go down into hell to be imprisoned. That's not metaphor. That is literal cosmology applied through ritual authority. So when we talk about exorcism in Ethiopia, we're not talking about a single prayer and a splash of water. We are talking about a multi-stage confrontation between a human healer, an unwilling host, and a named spiritual entity operating within the logic of Ethiopian Orthodox theology. Capture, interrogation, expulsion. And at every stage, there is tension, resistance, pain, theology, and hope. This isn't a drama for an audience. It is a desperate fight for a life. If you want to understand the world of the Debtera, or the Ethiopian exorcist, you start here, at the boundary between faith and fear, chant and scream, the cross and whatever looks back at you from behind someone's eyes. Talisman maker. Debteras create scrolls filled with angels, demons, names of God, geometric protective seals, psalm verses, cosmological diagrams, anatomical maps of the soul. If you've listened to my episode on the bandlet of righteousness, then you'll recognize most of these items as part of that particular work. The other most famous example, one that Debtera are primarily known for, are protection scrolls that are tightly wound up and worn around the neck. Though they can serve many purposes, the primary one that many universities have kept are protection scrolls for pregnant women to keep them safe until their child is born. To the outsider, these amulets may look like medieval grimoires. To Ethiopians, they are medicine, protection, theology in leather form. And that is because they use the enemy as fuel. When Debtera create these amulets, they will ritually slaughter a goat in order to harvest its skin as the papyrus. They then will use eggs and alcohol to lure and subsequently trap a demon. Once accomplished, They will then bind the evil spirit into the scroll itself so that it will be a battery to accomplish the protection. Now this is where it gets fun. Debteras are sometimes accused of sorcery, astrology, hexing rivals, manipulating lust, jealousy, and social power, interacting with demons instead of just fighting them. The same study I cited, Sympathy for the Devil, notes that Debteras are consulted because they operate in that taboo zone, not despite it, because people know priests won't touch certain problems. This creates a theological paradox. A priest reflects sanctity. A Debtera reflects need. Where the priest embodies doctrine, the Debtera embodies desperation. And that makes him powerful. Let me tell you a true story, or rather, a composite of many real stories documented in fieldwork. A woman is plagued at night. She screams. She thrashes. She says a shadow sits on her chest and whispers obscenities. Doctors call it psychosis. The family calls it czar. The priest prays, but nothing changes. So they go to a Debtera. He listens. He asks questions about jealousy, family resentments, sexual shame, because spirits attach to these human fractures. He prescribes holy water, scriptural recitation, and a talisman. Then, with beating sistra, he confronts the spirit. And eventually, it speaks, not metaphorically, out loud, through the woman. Finally, the spirit agrees, under oath of Mary and Michael, to leave. And when the screaming stops, the family doesn't thank psychiatry. They thank the Debtera. So from our demonology lens, what do we learn? The Debtera treats demons as active, embodied forces. They see possession as a social plus spiritual pathology. Exorcism is therapeutic, liturgical, and communal. Talismans aren't superstition. They're theological technology. The line between magic and ministry is situational, not doctrinal. And above all, they are proof that Christianity has always had a magical underground. It was never just incense and hymns. It was warding, summoning, banishing, binding, negotiating. Debteras are that underground made visible. So what do we do with the Debtera? We could write them off as medieval leftovers. We could demonize them as magicians. We could romanticize them as folk heroes. But what if we simply let them be what they are? A living example of how human beings deal with evil in the spaces where theology and reality don't quite touch. Because when your child is screaming at night, when the fields fail, when jealousy poisons a marriage, you don't ask what's canonical. You ask what works. And that's the world the Debtera serves. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you liked this episode, please consider leaving a review or becoming a Patreon supporter and earning 10,000 JJ Awesome bonus points, which, if you collect enough of them, can be redeemed for absolutely nothing except my eternal gratitude. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and if a man selling talismans in white robes knocks on your door after dark, ask him what he charges for demon protection. Thank you for listening to Southern Demonology. find us online at southerndemonology.com, which offers links to all of our social media and episodes. Southern Demonology is solely owned, produced, and edited by myself, and the intro and outro music are composed by me as well. If you have a moment, please rate, like, and share this podcast, as it is the best way to help support my work. As always, I am JJ, and it has been a pleasure to speak to you today.